All right. Hey, thank you for joining the JoJo and Joe show here at the Two Joes podcast. This is Main Joe coming at you from Main Joe Studio in the Salt Lake Valley. I am joined by my lovely co-host,
JoJo, coming at you this morning. It's a beautiful spring morning. Cloudy though, so makes it harder to see those UFOs when there's a lot of fog, or in this case, smog/clouds.
Yep. So today we are going to be watching episode 2 of The Basement Office and discussing it as we go along. We're still kind of ironing out the format a bit, so thank you for bearing with us. I think I've got some of the volume issues figured out, and I don't know if we'll get copyright struck on this or not. We probably will eventually. I think if you say the word copyright
in your podcast, that's something they look for.
Yeah,
so
I might have just blown
this part out.
Yeah, marker.
Maybe we should start over. No, I'm just kidding.
All right. So, unless do you want to comment on anything? Do you want to? We got the first episode published now.
I thought I sounded really good.
It turned out okay.
It was fun.
I think it was fun, and that's what we're here for. It's just to have fun.
Yeah, and no
BS
pressure.
about UFOs.
Yeah,
We don't know anything more than anybody else. We're average Joes, right? The Two Joes podcast. We're just looking at the stuff that's out online and talking about it.
Yeah. So we have a believer. That's me, JoJo, and we have a. What would you call yourself?
Well, I'm still not quite convinced we're being visited by
on the fence. Or maybe not even on the fence.
Entities, beings from other planets. I think there are UFOs out there that we don't know what they are just yet, and that's kind of what I'm hoping to discover is what are they? Who's piloting these things, if anybody? Are they drones? Are they organic? Are they from another time, another dimension?
I just want to shoot all the drones that I see with a BB gun. Well,
you're not talking about UFO drones. You're talking about drones, camera drones that people are flying around our neighborhood and spying on us in our backyard.
And other people think are UFOs. I mean, this is one possibility that some of the sightings by people, just your average Joe on the ground, it could have been somebody's, homemade, weird-looking deal. I mean, I'm not saying that would fool the pilots. That's a whole different story.
But yeah, I agree. I think some of these sightings could be just ordinary drones that have become quite popular since, Casey Neistat's vlogging and all that.
Well, anyway, so would you describe yourself as on the fence, standing on the ground next to the fence, or a few feet away?
I'm on the fence about aliens, yeah. I'm not quite sure.
Okay, what about UFOs? Or now they're called UAPs.
Yeah.
Are you on the fence about them?
No, I mean, there's obviously something out there flying around that we can't identify and evidently can't catch.
Okay, so that this, folks, here is the crux of the matter, like Main Joe said, is he doesn't necessarily believe that there's anything flying these things. That either they fly themselves or they're non-sentient machines, non-sentient biological things that just fly around for no reason.
Well,
I'm skeptical. But let's see what the Basement Office has to say.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, we're going to start right now.
And it's only when you're running, say, a government UFO program that you begin to see, wait a minute, we've got a witness over here, and that corroborates the witness over there. And these people don't know each other. For all they know, they're alone, but they're not.
I'm here to discuss the so-called flying saucers.
In 1947, an unidentified flying object allegedly crashed in Roswell, New Mexico, kicking off a mass wave of sightings, where hundreds of thousands of people reported seeing flying discs in the sky. Today we examine some of the best evidence we have concerning these flying saucers. Welcome to the Basement Office.
All right, so they're going to talk about Roswell in this one, which is one of my favorite UFO stories,
So to help us understand the flying saucer, I'm joined by Nick Pope, who worked for 21 years at the UK's Ministry of Defence. And you worked in the UFO office. You worked for the government, repping the military, and you were investigating UFOs officially.
Yes, and not only is my name in the now declassified parts of the British government's UFO files, but I wrote a lot of them, so yeah, I'm out there, I guess.
Do we find any saucers in the Ministry of Defense files?
We do, absolutely. It's a shape that comes up again and again and again over the years, UK, US, all around the world.
What is the genesis of the flying saucer?
Well, the phrase itself comes from Kenneth Arnold's sighting on June 24th, 1947. Now, Kenneth Arnold was a light aircraft pilot, and he saw 9 objects performing at what at the time was extraordinary speeds that he'd never seen or heard of before.
I actually have a picture of what Kenneth Arnold describes. This is the delta-shaped, looks like a boomerang almost.
All right, I'm going to stop it there because this shape is very, very familiar to me, right? It looks a lot like the B-2 bomber, and they're going to talk about other aircraft that are also in this flying wing, this delta type of shape.
Which they learned from sightings of these UFOs? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying this is a very familiar shape, and keep your eye on this shape because they're going to talk about this shape later on in subsequent
stuff. Okay, well, but my
episodes.
question is this. Who came up with the shape first?
Yeah.
Did we see it and then we decided, hey, let's try that out? You know, the engineers, obviously, not me. But yeah, it looks like a souped-up boomerang.
Yeah, and it looks like something that we have today, a B-2 bomber.
That's not a saucer. A saucer to me is like a plate or a bowl.
Right.
It's a round shape, so I'm confused.
Okay, well, they're going to explain that in a minute. I just wanted to mental note this shape, all right? We'll talk about it later.
All right.
Okay.
And I want to mental note the actual saucer shape. Because I have a story for later.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
He said there were 9 of these, right?
Yes, flying almost in formation.
Right. His description of the movement was something like this. They weren't flying in a straight line. They were kind of
So he's
going
bumping
like
it like
this.
jump,
And he said
jump,
it's
like skipping a rock.
A saucer would if you skipped it across the water.
Boom. That's it, right?
That's it.
That's flying saucer comes from that.
Comes from that. Now, as it happened,
That doesn't make sense to me. That's
the
skipping a
moment
rock.
his report made mainstream media news, that all hell broke loose, and reports came in from all around the U.S., indeed all around the world.
The flying saucer, a 20th century mystery, cannot be ignored. Reliable witnesses have sighted them over nearly every major city, along our air lanes, over secret research areas.
So there was a sort of sense almost of collective relief that it was okay to talk about this now. People were saying, oh, thank goodness someone else has gone public with this. Yes, I've seen something. And it really snowballed. And over the years, we have had, my goodness, I would hesitate to put a figure on it, but hundreds of thousands of sightings all around the world.
Arnold breaks the dam on the conversation. And then July 8th, 1947. What happens, Nick?
Well, this is, I guess, the big one. This is Roswell. We know for a fact that something crashed. And we know this because despite all the allegations of cover-ups and conspiracies, the first people to put out the story were the US military themselves. They said, we have recovered one of these flying discs. They actually caused a press release to be put out where they said the many rumors surrounding the flying disc, we are getting closer to solving this because now we've got one. And they told this story of how a rancher had recovered debris from his property and had assumed that maybe the military had been operating something and it's crashed. He got in touch. The military went, checked this thing out, and wow. And then, as I say, they put out this release and they say, we have recovered a flying disc. Within 24 hours, they changed the story. They said, we've made a terrible mistake. It was just a weather balloon.
Well, it sure looks like a weather balloon, in my opinion, on the pictures.
Well, they'll talk about the picture too. But do you see, they talk about that flying saucer thing. It's like one of the greatest misnomers there is because, like you said, it's not shaped like a saucer. It was the way it moved was the saucer-like thing. but yet they started calling them flying saucers. And that's kind of interesting to me that, okay, now that terminology comes out, now all of a sudden we're seeing flying saucers, and they're not shaped like a boomerang anymore. They're shaped like a disc. Isn't that interesting? I mean, is it all just planted in our minds or something? Or
Well,
what happened to the boomerang craft? They don't talk about those much anymore after this.
well, my opinion is it's just a different type of craft. They have the boomerang shape. I mean, look at all the different kind of aircraft we have. We have helicopters. Now we have unpiloted drones, right? This is aircraft. So even humans have a lot of different kinds of aircraft. And we're just one race.
Yeah, but the reason this kind of gives me a little, throws up a skeptical flag for me is because back in World War II, the Nazis were working on a flying wing. And flying wings are notorious for being very difficult to engineer and to make fly.
Okay, what is a flying wing?
The B-2 bomber. Are you familiar with the B-2 bomber?
Yes.
It's shaped like a flying wing. It's just the wing. It doesn't have a fuselage.
So it doesn't look like the flying saucer, the
It looks a lot
boomerangy
like
one?
the boomerangy one.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They probably patterned it after that.
But like I'm saying, in World War II, the Nazis were working on a flying wing. These flying wings are very hard to engineer, very hard to get to fly. I'll bet you they bounced along as the pilots were trying to manhandle these things and get them to fly.
Well, that would be something to research, but this is after World War II, right? When did World War II end?
I think this is 1947, so it's right at the tail end of World War
Yeah.
II. Yeah. So that's what I'm thinking. He saw 9 of these Nazi flying wings that the U.S. probably got after the war, perhaps, and were trying to figure out how to fly them, or if they were worth flying.
Who saw them again?
That private pilot saw them.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's a very good theory.
And then,
frankly.
they get the terminology flying saucer, and now all of a sudden we're seeing flying saucers.
Well, but don't forget, where did the Nazis get the idea in the first place? From a flying saucer.
Well, there you go. That's quite possible, too. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there, and they'll talk about that more later.
Okay, and so do you want to discuss your creepy feeling around why all of a sudden they started looking like round plates and discs again later? Because they named them flying saucers, and so then people started imagining instead that they were round, and so they became round?
Well, that's kind of what I'm
insinuating?
proposing here. That's a possibility, isn't it? We know how programmable our minds are.
Suggestible.
How suggestible, influenceable. I don't know if that's a word.
I don't think that's a word.
Okay, suggestible is good. Yeah, so that's what I'm positing. That's what I'm proposing. Is that's kind of what happened. So.
Okay, well,
Just a theory.
It's a valid theory.
We've got some of these Nazi flying wings. He can't fly them very well. This private pilot sees them and goes, what the hell are those?
Yeah.
They move like you skipped a saucer on a lake. Oh, they're flying saucers. Oh,
Who
now we got
skips
one
a
in
plate
Roswell.
on a lake?
I know. I
You
don't
use
know.
a rock. That just irritates me. Sorry, but it does. Okay, so I think your theory is valid. However, I completely disagree, and I have a story to tell. I think there's just more than one type of craft, as long as more than one type of alien.
That's obvious. I'm not arguing that at all. I'm
Yeah.
just throwing out another possible theory there.
So when you think it's a good time for my story, you let me know. This is about a round one.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's see if we can get through this Roswell story now. So the Air Force immediately comes out and says, we have a flying disc.
Okay, but they were round, or were they the boomerang shape?
The military says, we have a flying disc. They know the difference between a disc and a boomerang shape.
Okay, good.
And
Okay.
then 24 hours later say, oh, sorry, weather balloon.
Which you worked on weather balloons in the military.
No, I didn't work on weather balloons.
Well, I thought you did.
No,
You worked
weather
on weather
Weather equipment, not weather balloons, no.
And weather balloons are not weather equipment?
Well, Air Force didn't have any weather balloons to my knowledge. Not on my Air Force
well,
base.
okay. And where were you? You weren't that far away. You were in Texas.
Yeah, I was
right?
in Texas.
Don't you think that you would have known about them if they existed?
I wasn't there in 1947, though.
Yeah, you were there in, what, Like what? What year?
I was there in the late 80s.
Okay, so if they didn't exist in the 80s, why would they have existed in 1947?
Because they didn't have weather radar maybe back in 47.
Oh, it could be an outdated piece
weather
of
radar.
equipment.
We had the Weather Channel. When I was in there, we didn't have any need for weather balloons. So I don't know.
Okay, so they had need in 1947, and then in the 80s they didn't have need, and now they have need again?
I don't... What do you mean?
For weather
again?
balloons? Well, we're deciding, is that a valid excuse? It's a weather balloon. I'm positing they don't exist in the way that they're saying they, especially back in 1947, if they didn't even exist in the 80s.
I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm just saying I never worked on them. I never heard about them. I've never seen a weather balloon.
Yeah, that's suspicious. Okay, let's keep watching.
Wow.
Right.
These theories were checked when the armed forces investigated the flying saucers. Admiral Calvin Bolster of the Navy's Bureau of Aeronautics gives his conclusion.
I do not feel that these balloons explain the majority of the so-called flying saucer sightings that have appeared in the press.
Roswell was home to the 509th Bomb Group. At the time, they were the only atomic bomb-capable squadron anywhere in the world. These people were the best of the best, the elite of the elite. If ever there was a unit less likely to misidentify a weather balloon, it was these people. These things, it's something else, particularly when they're disc-shaped. It's one of those ironies of aviation. Disc-shaped objects generally don't make very good aircraft.
One of the most famous saucer sightings post-Roswell, post-1947, is 1950 in Oregon. You've got this craft that was photographed by a farmer, I believe it was Trent. And what makes this sighting so special?
Well, seeing is believing. And I think the whole flying saucer mystery had been talked about at national level for a while. But we really hadn't got many images of these things. And then along comes this.
And these photographs have been analyzed by professionals looking for hoax. And from what I understand, this is one of the photos that could not be proven as such.
The fact of the matter is, as you say, this has been looked at by a number of photographic experts who didn't find any aspects that were suspicious to them. I've done this in government. We have all sorts of imagery analysis resources and capabilities that can be brought to bear on photos and videos, and we can tell if things are a hoax.
Okay, so now we're moving on to a saucer sighting in Jersey, New Jersey. It's gone all the way to the East Coast. In Jersey, in 1951, pilots and police officers see a saucer.
This is important for a number of reasons. Firstly, I think it shows that this is something that's not isolated in any one particular area. It is all around the United States. But really what makes this stand out to me is the caliber of the witnesses. I mean, I don't want to disparage other witnesses, but there's no getting away from the fact that when you investigate a case where the witnesses are pilots and police officers, it gives it a level of credibility that perhaps some other cases don't have. But if you're a military officer or a pilot and you are caught making up a story and then maybe it gets into the papers, you'll be in front of your employer, your commanding officer, whoever it is. These can be career-ending situations. So, look, nobody is going to want to come and make a report like this unless they are absolutely certain about it.
All right, so I'm going to pause it there because they just talked about several UFO saucer sightings after Roswell, and these are flying discs. These are actual
plate-looking things.
Yeah, and so maybe this is a good time to come up to talk about your saucer story.
Okay. So, I think one thing that I find interesting is with all the radar and everything, and this is a question for you, Joe, if you know the answer, how can they measure distance? When they're taking a picture and they're in a plane and their radar says, okay, this object is X amount of miles or whatever, kilometers away from me. Have they done that?
Well, see, some UFOs appear on radar, others do not. If they do appear on radar, yes, they can tell how far away they are and what the elevation is, because how it works is you're bouncing waves off of this object and it's coming back, and you know how fast that wave travels.
And so from that, they then can extrapolate using math to be finding out exactly the size of this unidentified. What is it?
Flying object. Aerial phenomenon.
So this disk, this unidentified aerial phenomenon, if it's on radar, they can measure the size of it. Is that correct?
I think so, yes.
Okay. That's what I would like to know, distance and size. Mm-hmm. So I think, I'd like to do some research, and we'll get back to you when we do episode 3 of The Basement about this. Because this is my story, okay? So I have a friend who lives in central Utah. Central Utah is desert-ish, mostly barren, right? It's a very dry state, but it's kind of high elevation, and so it's got sagebrush. It's really beautiful, actually. Lots of good geology that's made cool mountains and plateaus and stuff. But for some reason, there's a lot of, alien activity down there, and it includes unidentified. I'm never going to remember it. Aerial
UFO. I like UFO better. Anyway.
Okay, fine. Anyway, so this is from this person who's one of my good friends that I mentioned in our first episode, who's an expert. Okay, and she told me that they had this craft come, and it was a cloudy day, which is what reminded me of it when I looked out and saw clouds this morning. It was a cloudy day, but the craft hovered just above the cloud layer. So every once in a while, as the clouds were moving, you could see a piece of it. But this thing was huge. I mean, it covered, like, as far as the eye could see, you couldn't see the end of it. Okay? And you could feel the sort of pressure of it, right? And the clouds that were kind of going underneath it, I think it was having to adjust its height to kind of stay mostly out of sight. Mm-hmm. So this thing was so huge, and it hung around for, I don't know, I can't remember exactly, but I think about 5 hours, and all of a sudden, it was gone. That was a snap. I can't do it. Give me a snap.
No, that's a good snap. That was a good snap.
All of a sudden, snap, it was gone. And you could all of a sudden feel this cooler rush of air, and the clouds kind of went away. So, was this aircraft made out of dead stuff? Was it made out of living stuff? Was somebody piloting it? Was it piloting itself, whether it's mechanical or organic? What was it doing? Yeah. Did it attract the clouds? Did it create the clouds? There's all these, and the thing was huge.
Yeah.
I mean,
what would the need be for something that size? I mean, they talk about size of craft in this show a lot, and they do seem to be getting bigger, these UFO sightings and the craft and themselves.
And the other thing, too, that's a question on my mind is, how does it relate to nuclear ability? So humans, obviously we're hopefully not ever going to do that, but if we did, we could easily destroy the Earth, which is a very real possibility. I believe that some of these crafts are here to prevent that, because that's what Roswell was, right? That was the only nuclear capable Air Force base in the world at the time.
Correct. Yeah.
And there was so many crafts watching what they were doing that one crashed. That's what I think.
Yeah, well, that's basically the theory here. There's been lots of sightings around these types of facilities, nuclear power plants,
they don't want us to ruin
silos.
This beautiful planet.
This planet is amazing, yeah. Interesting. So that's an interesting story, and
But isn't there a sighting that we watched on the last episode of Basement Office number 1 that talked about how there was a nuclear bomb and a craft appeared and it didn't go off? Or is that, I'm hearing that from somewhere else. So
Yeah.
that is a story that I've heard, so I will research that as well.
The story is that this thing appeared above like a nuclear missile silo in Montana or somewhere
Oh, here we go.
remote.
Okay.
And it basically shut the system down so
There
that
we
we
go.
could not launch the missile if we would have wanted to. That's kind of what the story
Okay.
is. And they'll talk about that too, I believe, at some
Okay,
point.
well, let's keep going.
All right.
And when all of those witnesses, independent of each other, describe a disc or saucer in the sky, that's creepy, man.
It is, and that's actually another very important aspect of all this. You know, in these situations that you're not dealing with a hoax because people independently, quite unconnected with each other, in most cases with no knowledge of each other's reports, come forward separately. And it's only when you're running, say, a government UFO program that you begin to see, wait a minute, we've got a witness over here, and that corroborates the witness over there. And these people don't know each other. For all they know, they're alone, but they're not.
So now we're moving to 1958. The military of Brazil takes these photos of a saucer in the sky.
Yes, this is a Navy training ship and multiple witnesses and these extraordinary photos. And not just the photos, of course, the eyewitness testimony. One of the reasons why governments study these photos and videos so closely is that if you are to understand things like the energy source, the propulsion system, the aerodynamics, you need to kind of get a handle on the shape, the size, the speed, and that can tell you things.
You're right, you don't see wings, you don't see engines, you don't see propulsion systems of any kind in any of these photos. So when the military, again, themselves are seeing these things, taking pictures of these things, and can't explain these things, when the experts can't explain these things, then it's something. What makes these more significant than, for example, the Trent photo from Oregon?
Well, I think it's the Navy aspect. It's kind of one of those interesting things. You would think that UFOs are an Air Force issue, and often they are, but the Navy seems never to be far away with this. And it's also interesting that over the years there have been a number of reports of UFOs emerging from and flying back into the ocean. Some of these things, I've heard them called USOs, unidentified submerged objects.
Nick, I was just about to get to maybe believe they were aliens, and now you're throwing me a curveball.
So I mentioned these USOs in our first episode. So yeah, it is interesting. It's a new term to me. I didn't really realize that UFOs. I never really connected UFOs in water. Like, there's why are they always over water, or why they seem interested in the water. So that's pretty interesting, and it also kind of adds to the theory of they might be organic from somewhere below the surface, perhaps. Or
True, or I wonder if that Navy ship was carrying nukes.
Chilean Navy in the 50s? Doubt it. I don't think they had nukes yet.
Okay.
I don't know if they do now, quite frankly. And not that many countries do.
Well, I wasn't talking about a particular country. I'm just saying.
Well, it's from the Chilean Navy.
Chilean Navy.
Well, I want to hear more about how they were moving. Tell me about them. How fast were they going? What were they doing? Because like the first saucer, that boomerang, which wasn't even a saucer, did that up and down rock skipping motion. Well, the Tic Tacs today are very smooth and very fast. So,
but they can stop on a dime.
So
turn on a dime.
Yeah. What were these saucers doing? Were they? I've seen some video where it's kind of waffling through the air. Like a weird wobble to it or something.
Well, I do have a theory. If you'd like to hear it.
Sure.
So,
that's what we're here for.
I think what's happening right now, and I'm talking right now, this is how many years later? It's 2021 now, right? Mm-hmm. So this is back in the 50s. Mm-hmm. So 75, 80 years later, so a full generation later, here we are right now, and its interest in UFOs is peaking again. And why is that? Why now versus, say, 10 years ago? But it is happening now. And I think, now I realize that I just forgot the other thing that I was going to say. So keep talking, Main Jonah. I'll think of it. It comes to me.
Well, the reason why the UFO topic is coming up and it's more mainstream and people are more willing to talk about it and it's not as taboo as it was is because the military came out and said, yes, this video of a fighter pilot tracking this object that he could not catch, blah, 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 and is real. And we acknowledge that this was taken from an F-16 fighter jet and all that. So that's why it's kind of coming out now.
Yes, but that's not what I was asking.
And the pilot is also coming out and doing interviews and saying he had eyeballs on this Tic Tac. It's not just video from a tracking system on his plane. He had eyeballs on it.
Okay, but my question was why, because I don't believe that, for the last 75 years or whatever, 70 years, there's been no UFOs that any military person has ever seen. But there have been a lot fewer. And now, so my theory is they're around more right now for some reason. And so we're going to see them more.
Well,
sometimes they're not around as much. And why is that?
Yeah, well, if you read the comments under a lot of these videos, people think that the big reveal is coming, that the actual aliens among us thing is going to happen.
Well, it will happen when the consensus reality is ready to believe it. So, and that reminds me of the other thing that I was going to point out is, you remember the last episode we did, basically humans are learning how to see alien ships and how to see aliens. It's kind of like the native people
the Aztecs
in Spain. Yeah, when they landed, they couldn't see the ships because they didn't know that even existed in their reality. And so literally they didn't exist until all of a sudden they started interacting with them. So we're interacting with them a little bit in the air, right? We haven't really interacted much on land. We've interacted while we've been asleep or, quote unquote, maybe abducted or chose to go up in one of the ships, right? So I think we're learning how to see them. So that bouncy flight that you're talking about that probably is an estimation of how they fly. Our brains can't comprehend the mechanics of how they fly, and so we can't visually see them. And so this Air Force guy who had eyeballs on it, right, he could only see it move so far out of his usual belief system. Okay? If it would have been way out of his belief system so far that he had no context for it, he would not have seen it. So he did see it. He saw how it moved, but only as much as his brain could process. That's my point.
Interesting. So you think there's more to that sighting, but he just couldn't comprehend it?
I don't think they move the way we think they move because it doesn't make sense. And it's just that we're learning to see how they move because right now we can't even conceptualize it.
Well, that's an interesting theory. I'll put a pin in that one and keep an eye on for more info on that. That's an interesting theory.
Okie dokie.
All right, let's continue.
Well, why not? That's, I guess, what this phenomenon does to you.
USOs?
Yes, USOs.
Oh my God.
But you're right. Just as you think you're beginning to get a handle on this phenomenon, there's a new aspect to it.
It could be coming from the ocean?
Well, that's one of a number of theories about this. Look, put it this way. If UFOs are extraterrestrial visitors, any civilization that has mastered the secrets of interstellar travel probably isn't going to be worried by flying into and out of the water.
Okay, fair point. Let's move forward to the Heflin photos from 1965. So here's Rex Heflin. He's out on the road in 1965, and this thing flies over. What can you tell us about the Heflin photos, which blow my mind?
Yeah, again, it's probably one of the clearest, sharpest images that we have of a UFO.
So the thing that blew my mind is that I originally thought the Heflin photo was only this first photo, which is the most famous photo. It turns out there are four, at least four, because he follows it flying over the street. So if the first one was a hoax, he threw something, he hung something, but there are more. He would have had to do that multiple times, and it definitely looks like he's following something moving
Yes,
in the line.
and that's human nature. If you saw a UFO and you had a camera, you would probably be doing exactly the same thing. Wow. Click, 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 click. And you follow it, you track it. That's what he's doing. He's tracking this.
There is a photo of a round circle of smoke where he claims this disappeared.
Yes, now there is a meteorological phenomenon called a hole punch cloud, but when you have an object seen that is itself the thing that causes the hole in the cloud, that makes you think, wow, the speed and acceleration of that is extraordinary because aircraft don't do that.
This one also blows my mind. This next photo from 1971, released by the Costa Rican government. The government. Also, crystal clear. My opinion, such a great photo. I have a difficult time, Nick. I have a difficult time with photos like this because half of my brain wants to say, this is someone messing around and, you know, pulling people's chain. And the other half of my brain says, well, wait a minute. Let me try to get to the bottom of what the hell this thing is. Give me some context on this photo.
Sure, well, as you said, this is an official photo. This was part of the Costa Rican government, and what they were doing was a survey of the lake there for purposes of hydroelectric power stations and such like. And so this was a survey picture. The government is not in the business of hoaxing people. And so when something comes out like this, I mean, you can take this to the bank. Of course we know there are hoaxes. Of course we know there are fakes. But what we're doing really is trying to build up a bigger picture. And just because we have some fakes, you know, stories and photos and things, doesn't mean the phenomenon itself isn't absolutely real. It is.
There is a famous case where I'm convinced it is a hoax, and that is the Gulf Breeze photos. The one thing about this Gulf Breeze thing that really I have a problem with is that the bottom of the craft itself does have this kind of like paper plate texture to it. But on the flip, the part of me that thinks this could be real is actually this photo where the light of this thing is covering a road. The road is what, 14, 16 feet wide, 20 feet wide? Obviously it couldn't be a handheld model if it's covering a road. What are your opinions on this?
Yes,
it looks awesome.
It's a little bit, a little bit too good to be true. It does look to me suspiciously like some sort of model, maybe built around a light fixture of some sort. To me, it doesn't quite add up. If this UFO really was as close to the road as the guy said he saw it, then particularly if there's some exotic energy source there,
it would leave something.
There would be some sort of, physical trace evidence, whether it was simply heat or whether it was radioactivity. So when you investigate UFOs for the government, you don't do anything in isolation. You investigate the sighting, but you also investigate any photo or video you have. And this is the sneaky bit. You also investigate the witness. And it's only when you put everything together that you come to a final judgment.
All right, I'm going to pause it there. So they talked about several more UFOs, and you kind of snickered at the one of the Costa Rican government is not in the business of spoofing us.
Well, what he said is the government's governments, plural, are not in the business of tricking anybody or, doing any kind of a hoax or any kind of a thing that's not real. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I can see why you snickered, because obviously they obfuscate a lot of information that they don't give to the public and everything. But,
including UFOs.
Yeah, but usually they obfuscate UFO sightings. They don't create them. You know what I mean? So that's why I kind of give it some credibility.
Okay, that makes sense.
The government would cover that up before they'd release it and say, hey, this is an official government, Costa Rican government aerial photo when we were surveying this lake that we captured this UFO on.
And I wasn't snickering about that because that, like you said, or like they said, it was a survey photo, so it was so clear. I like that one. Yeah. This one with this guy where he's got that picture of it covering the road. So whatever it is the size of a 2-lane highway, I take it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's reflecting on the road, and then Dr.
Pope?
Yeah, makes the point that it would have left behind some kind of residue if it really was close enough to the road for that light to reflect on it. Okay? That is an erroneous assumption. Pardon me, but how the hell could humans possibly know maybe those things don't leave residue? Look at all the residue we've left on our planet. They're probably going, you guys are insane. You know, we understand UFOs so little that we can't make the statement that that was a hoax simply because there was no residue on the road. I just don't agree with that at all.
Yeah, I think you can't use that as the sole determination, residue or some physical residue left over. But there are quite a few sightings and UFO occurrences where there has been radiation burns on trees and other things that it leaves behind. Like even your UFO story of your friend down in southern Utah, she could feel something, you know what I mean? It was
a pressure.
A pressure, yes.
Almost like she said it felt like barometric pressure, but in a slightly different way,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like right before a storm.
Mm-hmm. So I wonder if that was closer to the ground, would it leave some sort of residue? I don't know.
Well, and she said that when it left, it felt lighter and a little bit cooler. You know, not as heavy. The air wasn't as heavy, and it was a little bit cooler. So I don't know. You know, obviously there's more than one kind of craft. So
yeah, obviously, yeah.
But that one, I guess, could have been a hoax. But look at it this way, what was that? 1987 or whatever year that was. If he would have constructed something that was that size, that was capable of hovering over the road with a light, it would have left residue. Because we're humans and we leave residue on everything. So if that really was a hoax, there would have been residue. That is my point, too.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there. So you're kind of giving this, I think it's Florida sighting, more weight than they do even. Because he's kind of saying it's too good to be true. But you're saying, look, this thing was massive. The light covered the road. Just would have been too hard to fake.
Yeah, how could he have faked it without it leaving residue?
Yeah.
That's my point.
Like you said in episode 1, the only reason we kind of think that one might be more hoaxy than the others is because it doesn't quite fit the shape. It doesn't fit the narrative that we've already created in our minds by seeing these old-fashioned flying discs, which are more plain, more gray, more dull. This one had lights, it had more contour, more portals.
Well, and maybe it was popped open.
Yeah.
You know,
Ooh.
Normally they
that.
just fly with everything shut down, and this one wanted to check out that guy.
It was slow rolling, yeah.
Yeah, it was like, let's, go over here and do this. I don't know.
I like that theory a lot.
Because it's the same shape, basically. It just has its habitat ring popped open.
I love it. Habitat ring. That's good stuff. Something that keeps coming up for me that I find pretty fascinating is how these things will just disappear. Like this farmer who in the 65 took several pictures of this flying saucer going across the road in front of him. He took a picture, then poof.
And you see the smoke. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Or the portal thing. Yeah, and you said your friend down south, it was kind of poof, and it was gone.
Yep.
And there's several other sightings, too, where initially I thought, they're just going poof, 20,000 miles an hour. They're just, bam, out of here. But no, there seems to be something more to it than just that. Almost like they're going through some kind of portal or wormhole. Or
time portal.
A dimensional portal or something, yeah.
Yeah, I happen to agree with that. It's so far beyond our understanding that we can... The best things that we can do is keep trying to expand our understanding. And so these, if you think some of these are very odd theories that we're putting out, what we're actually trying to do is help the human race expand its ability to notice possibilities that are different from what already is.
I like that.
Because our culture right now is stuck in a really yucky place. Because of COVID, because of the way humans have handled it. Instead of it being something that brings us all together, it's dividing us.
Yeah, but we were
divided before COVID, thanks to
a lot of factors,
things.
but yeah.
Okay, well, let's keep watching.
All right.
We're almost done, right?
Yep. About 5 minutes left.
When it comes to big, famous sightings, flying saucer sightings, it kind of drifts off. The saucer had its day, it seems. The 40s, 50s, 60s, saucers, and then it's kind of taken over by a triangle. Really, the next big publicized saucer sighting isn't really until, in my opinion, 2006 at Chicago O'Hare.
And then there's the story you may have already heard about, United Airlines employees who swear it was something otherworldly in the skies above Chicago's O'Hare Airport on November 7th.
The pilot of the plane waiting to depart to Charlotte looks up and there is a saucer hovering not that far over the plane.
Several airport workers said they saw a saucer-shaped UFO hovering just beneath the clouds at the airport.
What do you know about this? Is this a credible case?
Absolutely. Firstly, the number of witnesses. Secondly, the caliber of the witnesses. What is really important here is that you have a UFO, whatever that object was, in the strictly controlled and regulated airspace, some of the most crowded skies in the world. I mean, my goodness, if that isn't an air safety issue, I don't know what is. But one reporter basically put in some Freedom of Information Act requests and then targeted the FAA about it, and reluctantly the story emerged, oh yeah, we had this incident. But they then tried to write it off and they said, oh, it was just weather. Well, right. It wasn't weather. There is this meteorological
the hole in the cloud
thing. Yeah, the whole
But it only
cloud.
happens during certain temperatures, right?
Exactly, and you can always check the meteorological data
of that time of day, and they did, and it contradicted that possibility, essentially, right?
Yeah, and the other thing is, I hear rumors about this case. I hear rumors that there are photos and videos still to emerge, but maybe some of the witnesses are still a little reluctant.
You don't believe this was possibly your imagination?
It was definitely not my imagination.
CNN interviewed one of the supposed witnesses to the 2006 Chicago O'Hare saucer. He refused to have his face shown, his silhouette, voice change. You could see that there was a fear about being identified as in person or a name.
That would make sense, for example, if they are still employed by some of the major airlines, but maybe, as people move on and retire or change jobs, maybe those kind of inhibitors will fall by the wayside, and this story may not yet be told in entirety.
Like you said, I hope one day we find out what the heck this was above the airport hangar. But other than that, where did it go? What happened to the saucer?
I'm not sure it's ever really gone away, and I wouldn't be surprised if there were and still are saucer-shaped sightings. But what I think has happened is that, as you said, the saucer kind of had its day. A new shape has come to the fore and thrust its way into public awareness. And nowadays, when people talk about UFOs, increasingly the best reports are triangular-shaped craft.
Next episode, we'll dive deep into the world of the Black Triangle, from mass sightings
I saw this up close and personal
to incredible first-hand accounts.
All right, that's the end of episode 2. So this 2006 Chicago O'Hare Airport incident, I'm skeptical of that one, simply because there's no video, photographic evidence. There's nothing. There's just a bunch of witnesses, apparently. I mean, I think they showed briefly one shot that looked pretty much like a cloud, but,
Well, I don't know. I think I believe it. I think that the stigma, especially because that was right around Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and you saw when they were showing the picture of when the announcer on the news was saying the story, they had the Close Encounters picture up, like, So the stigma actually in the late 80s right there was
2006.
Worse. Oh, 2006. It's gotten worse. Which is
stigma's
interesting.
Gotten worse?
Because that guy wouldn't even let his name or voice be heard.
Well, it was still evident. I mean, it was still there for sure. Yeah, in 2006.
So that's worse than...
Only now is the stigma starting to slightly lift.
I hope so. Yeah. And the other thing that we didn't cover was their brief description of submersible, or perhaps that's where they come from, these crafts.
They didn't dive into that very much.
They
no.
didn't, but that's an interesting theory. Could things be going on in the depths of the ocean, which do we have equipment that we could really see everything? Can we map the depth of the ocean? Yes. So don't you think we would notice if there were a bunch of UFOs being either manufactured or grown at the bottom of the sea? Would we know?
I don't know. Yeah, because I don't think sonar is that sophisticated.
But how do we map the bottom of the ocean? Because we can.
Sonar.
Your map says the depth. So wouldn't the sonar pick up something weird sitting on the bottom or floating in the middle?
I'm saying that it wouldn't. It's not like it comes back as a photograph. It comes back as, hey, there's an object there, and it could have been. They probably think it's a whale or something.
Well, yeah, but you can sonar all around it to get the shape of it. You can figure out how far away it is. I wouldn't be surprised if our government has another division. They have a division that's looking into UFOs, and they have a separate division that's also looking into the USOs, the submersibles.
Okay.
So I think they're hiding that from us. Because why wouldn't they investigate that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. It'd be interesting. But I think it's probably, if they are investigating USOs, it's probably all combined into one, that ATIP program that they're talking about, which is the current...
ATIP?
The current government UFO program where they're investigating sightings and stuff.
Oh, I haven't heard about that.
Well, they mentioned it a couple times, but not in depth.
So what is it?
It's just a government department or something.
So is it like part of what branch of the government?
Yeah, maybe they'll talk about it later. I don't want to get into it right now.
Okay.
What I want to bring up is this hole punch cloud that they mentioned several times. Mm-hmm. It does kind of look like a UFO in certain cases, but I'm wondering maybe if that's... I've never seen a hole punch cloud. I've never even heard of them until now.
They're cool. I was trying to show you the circles the other day when we were on a walk, remember? Look at that circle. Those are hole punch clouds.
Is it a portal, though? That's what I'm thinking, almost.
Yeah.
It's like, is that the residue of a ship going through the portal or coming out of the portal? Or,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Or entering this reality and then leaving it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I like that.
Because I don't know, I've never seen one, never heard of one, and I was in weather equipment, and I never mentioned a hole punch cloud that I remember them talking about. So I don't know. Anyway, interesting episode. The saucers came and went. They may have had their day. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's just different types, different races of aliens. I mean, they have different crafts, and maybe they mount expeditions to visit us at different times. That's what I think. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's had its day.
Interesting.
I think maybe their technology changed, and now it's
I like that theory.
The black arrow. And I love the way he always says, creepy. I can't wait till the next episode. This is going to be fun.
The next episode's on black triangles, and they showed a couple pictures as they were wrapping up the episode, and some of those videos that they showed, to me, really looked like drones flying information, like regular human drones flying information with lights on them, because they weren't,
And then there was like one off to the side, just kind of looking at all of them. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Kind of hoaxy. Well, we'll find out.
Yeah,
this has been fun.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, everyone. This is the JoJo and Joe Show, spin-off of the Two Joes podcast. We're talking about UFOs. We're going through the Basement Office New York Post series on YouTube, just to give us some fodder to talk about and discuss and have some fun with.
All right. See you next time.